Sleeping Beauty. Once upon a time, there lived a king and queen who had plenty of money and plenty of fine clothes to wear and plenty of good things to eat and drink. Yet, despite their many blessings, they were very disappointed, for they had no children. One day, as the queen was walking by the side of the river, a frog crept onto a lily pad and said to her, "Your wish shall be fulfilled. Before this year has gone by, you shall have a daughter." What the frog said came true, and within a year, the queen had given birth to a baby girl. The king and queen were so delighted they could not contain their joy. They ordered a great feast and invited not only their relatives, friends, and neighbors, but also the wise women, in order that they might be kind and well disposed towards the child. There were 13 wise women in the kingdom, but as the king had only 12 golden plates for them to eat off of, one of them was left without an invitation. The feast was held with much rejoicing, and when it came to an end, the wise women bestowed their magical gifts upon the baby. One gave virtue, another beauty, a third riches, and so on with everything in the world that one can wish for. When 11 had made their promises, suddenly the 13th charged in. Furious at being slighted by the royal family, she pointed at the princess and cried with a loud voice, "In her 15th year, the king's daughter shall prick herself with a spindle and fall down dead." Then she stormed out of the great hall, leaving them all shocked in her wake. The 12th wise woman, whose good wish still remained unspoken, came forward. She could not undo the evil sentence, but she could soften it. She said, "When the princess pricks her finger on her 15th birthday, she shall not die, but instead fall into a deep sleep for 100 years. The king hoped to save his dear child from the threatened evil, so he gave orders that every spindle in the whole kingdom should be burned. As the princess grew up, the gifts of the first 11 wise women were fulfilled, for the princess was so beautiful, good-natured, generous, and wise that everyone who met her was bound to love her. It happened that on the very day when the princess turned 15 years old, the king and queen were not at home, and she was left in the palace quite alone. So the princess explored around the palace by herself, looking into all the rooms and bedchambers, until at last she came into an old tower. Curious, she climbed up the narrow, winding staircase and reached a little door. As she reached out her hand, the door sprang open. There in a little room sat an old woman with a spindle, busily spinning her flax. "Good day," said the princess. "What are you doing there?" "I am spinning," said the old woman, nodding her head. "What sort of thing is that?" that rattles around so merrily?" asked the girl, reaching her hand toward the spindle. But as soon as she touched it, she pricked her finger and immediately fell down upon the bed that stood there, falling into a deep sleep. This sleep extended over the whole palace. The king and queen, who had just come home and entered the great hall, fell asleep. And the whole of the court with them, the horses too, went to sleep in the stable, the dogs in the yard, the pigeons upon the roof, and the flies on the wall. Even the fire that was flaming on the hearth became quiet and slept. Around the castle grew a hedge of thorns, which every year became higher. Eventually, the briar hedge grew all over the castle so that none of it could be seen, not even the flag upon the roof. But the story of the beautiful sleeping briar rose, as the princess was called, was told throughout the country. From time to time, princes tried to get through the briar hedge into the castle, but they always found it impossible, for the thorns held fast together. After many, many years, another prince came to that country. He met an old man who told him the story of the briar hedge, and how a castle stood behind it in which a wonderfully beautiful princess named Briar Rose had been asleep for 100 years, along with her court. The old man also told of the many princes who had tried unsuccessfully to get through the thorny hedge. But the prince said, "I am not afraid. I will go and save the Princess Briar Rose." The prince set out for the palace on the very day the 100 years of slumber had been completed. Thus, when the prince came near to the briar hedge, he found nothing but large and beautiful flowers, which parted for each other and let him pass unhurt. In the castle's yard, he saw the horses and spotted hunts lying asleep. On the roof sat the pigeons with their heads under their wings. When he entered the great hall, he saw the whole court lying asleep, and up by the throne lay the king and queen. The prince continued deeper into the palace, and everything was so still that he could hear every breath he drew. At last, he climbed the steps to the tower and opened the door of the little room where Briar Rose was sleeping. There she lay, so beautiful that he could not turn his eyes away. So he leaned over and gently kissed her hand. The moment he kissed her, Briar Rose began to open her eyes, awakening with a smile for the prince. Then they went down to the great hall together, where the king, the queen, and the whole court were waking up and looking at each other in great astonishment. The horses stood up and shook themselves. The hounds jumped up and wiggled their tails. The pigeons flew into the air. The flies on the wall buzzed about, and the fire in the kitchen once again flickered and cooked the meat as the kingdom came back to life. Soon thereafter, the weddings of the prince and BRIER rose was celebrated throughout the kingdom, and they lived happily together to the end of their days. The end. Thank you for listening, boys and girls. This is from Your Story Fairies. Have a good night. Sweet dreams.